Hey y'all, this is Philip from Austin Trail Running Company, and I wanted to talk to y'all today about picking the right running shoe. If you're like me, you've probably spent quite a few dollars on shoes that didn't run right, or didn't feel good on your feet, or just didn't fit, especially if you purchased online, and now they just sit in your closet or you've donated them. So I wanted to give a few tips on how to make sure that when you purchase a pair of shoes, you feel confident in that purchase and you actually enjoy them. The first thing I wanted to say was that the best way to pick out a pair of shoes is go to a reputable shoe store. Now, if you live in Austin, feel free to come to Austin Trail Running Company, but even if you live outside of town, go to a place that has knowledgeable runners that know what a shoe should feel like on your foot and can give you advice as to your goals, make a selection off of your injury history, that sort of thing. The next thing I would say is that you should tell your fitter everything. You should tell them about your injury history. You should tell them about your current running routine. You should also tell them about what goals you have, whether or not you're wanting to increase your mileage, or maybe there's a goal race that's coming up. You should tell them that as well. You should tell them whether or not you have an excessively wide or narrow foot, because they'll be able to pick the kind of shoes that fit your foot best. And the reason I'm focusing so much on fit is because as much as I love a shoe that has tons of features, has like Kevlar in the upper or really sticky rubber on the bottom for trail running or something like that, fit is the most important factor in picking out a shoe. I have a friend that went and hiked the entire Appalachian Trail in a pair of Crocs because they were the only shoes that fit her. That will not work for most people, but for her, the fit just happened to work, and she ended up being very happy in those shoes. So when fitting, I'd like to suggest a few things to look for when you're trying on a shoe. The first thing I'd look for is making sure that your toes are not touching the front at all. They should not be touching the front at any point during your stride, whether running or walking. Ideally, I suggest that people have about a ½ inch of width, or essentially about a thumbnail width of space from your longest toe to the front of the shoe. That way, you're not constantly banging your toe up against the front of the shoe, causing black toenail and all sorts of unhappy stuff that nobody likes. This is especially important in trail shoes, as on trail shoes you tend to go on steeper descents and downhills, which just makes the problem of a small shoe even worse. The next thing I would suggest is try and figure out whether or not the heel on the back of the shoe feels good. Some shoes tend to have what's called a semi-flexible heel counter. That means that it's nice and floppy, and for people that tend to struggle with Achilles tendonitis or tendinopathy, or they tend to just have an issue with any kind of sensitivity on their Achilles tendon, having a soft heel counter can be a plus. However, for people like me that like to have a little bit more of a secure fit in the back, having a nice, secure, rigid heel in the back can be a nice comfort and just generally feels good, especially if you have a tendency to have what's called heel lift, where your foot starts to come out of the shoe. A nice, secure Achilles heel cup can be really, really nice. And then the third thing I'd like to suggest is figure out how the shoe flexes and moves while you're running in it. Some shoes tend to be very, very flexible, like so. They tend to move in all sorts of directions, and for some people, that's a good thing. That's how their foot wants to move. That's, in general, the kind of experience they like. Some people prefer a really stiff shoe, a shoe that tends to not flex a whole lot and tends to either have a rocker bottom, something that will kind of roll them into each step, or something that just generally gives a lot of protection underfoot. I tend to prefer a stiffer shoe in general, not a ridiculously stiff shoe, but a stiffer shoe in general. Some people prefer a more flexible shoe. And the flex of the shoe and the ride of the shoe is incredibly important when trying to pick out a piece of footwear. And that's why I suggest when you're in your running store, try the shoes out on the treadmill, take a couple of laps around the store on there. Sometimes if it's a trail shoe, they'll let you out into their backyard and you can try running on the grass or something like that, or hopping on some rocks. That way you can get a real feel for the shoe. And that's incredibly important because even though a lot of shoe purchases are made online nowadays, I tend to find that I'm happiest with my purchase when I'm actually able to try out the shoe in store and really get a feel for it. Because even if a shoe does fit perfectly, if the ride underfoot doesn't feel quite right, then you may not use it as much. It may not be your favorite shoe. And so that's why I recommend going into your shoe store, making sure you get the fit right, talk with somebody who's an expert, and actually try the shoes on in store. Run on the treadmill, hop in the backyard, that sort of thing. And with those kind of techniques, I really think that you'll be confident in your purchase of a shoe. Thanks so much.